All right, good evening, everybody. I'd like to call to order this evening's February 22nd, 2021 Board of Education meeting for Hazlet Public Schools. If you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Great, and I will take a quick roll call. Frozen? Is he frozen?
Oh, you're unfrozen, Tammy.
Roll call. This happened last time when I tried to do the roll. The internet gods don't like me. But let's give this a try, another try. Treasurer Byrd?
Here.
Trustee Collins?
Here.
Trustee Mashad?
Here.
Trustee Maury?
Here.
Vice President Polverento?
Here.
Secretary Wheeler?
Here.
Okay, awesome. Got through that. We'll move it on to Mr. Cook for the superintendent's report.
Thank you, President Lemmer. I just have two things this evening. First and foremost, we are on the receipt of retirement for Jean Minima, our child care program director. She has submitted her retirement effective June 30th, and Jean has been with the district for 33 years. So congratulations to Jean. We wish her well in her retirement. And then the next thing is the parent survey. We did send out a parent survey on Friday along with the publication. I just want to remind parents to fill out that survey. We did have a few questions over the weekend, and I've gotten some emails, so I wanted to try to clarify a few things. First and foremost, when we sent out the survey prior to this, and we sent our hybrid models, and we had our cohorts blue and gold and Viking, those were set when we went to the original hybrid learning. Those are still in place moving forward. Really the purpose of the survey is to see if in fact we do make some changes, would parents want to make a change for their staff or for their child. And so those are still in place. We are still going to have an in-person and a hybrid or a virtual option moving forward. But as always, we've said anytime that we move to make any changes, we want to give parents the option to potentially make a change if we can make those changes. Right now, those cohorts are locked in moving forward. But as I mentioned, if we make some changes, we wanted to make sure that parents did have the opportunity to make a change if they wanted to moving forward. We have been able to honor some of those changes since we've even been in hybrid. So we've had parents that wanted to come in person or wanted to go online. So we've been as mindful as we can of trying to honor those requests. And so hopefully moving forward, we can continue to do that as a district so we can offer choice to parents. So I'll speak a little more about the survey in my report coming up, but I just wanted to make that clarification. That concludes my report.
All right, any questions? I know I have some questions about the survey, but sounds like we can transition to the return to school update and address those at that point. Does anyone have any other questions? All right, I'm seeing shaking of heads. So Mr. Cook, carry on. Discussion item.
So moving on to the discussion item of our response to return plan update. I just want to start by giving a few comments on our in-person school that's going on right now. As you all know, we started hybrid February 1st for elementary and secondary February 8th. So all indications is that we've been continuing to receive positive reports from our principals. Students are very happy to be back. I just want to say once again, thanks to staff and everyone associated with making this return possible and making it go smoothly as we move forward. The next point I wanted to make is that all our Hazlet Public Schools employees who choose to receive the vaccine, the Pfizer vaccine, should be vaccinated, including the 14-day period after which they receive their second shot by March 19th, 2021. So by that point, theoretically, everyone who chose to get the vaccine will be fully protected by that time. And we have received word that after you've received your second shot and you've gone through that 14-day period, that no quarantine is required if you are exposed. That's recommendations not only by the health department, but by CDC. So moving forward, if in fact we have an exposure in one of our classrooms, that staff members who have been vaccinated will not be required to quarantine. So, and then as we've talked last time, we're in the process of developing our timeline for the next phase, which could potentially include additional half days or full days. There's still some work in progress to do that. And the next phase of in-person learning would begin sometime after March 19th. As I mentioned, we wanted to make sure that we got through that full vaccination process for all of our staff before we looked at moving into more in-person instruction. So we will share a timeline as soon as we're able to come up with that. And I'll talk a little about what the steps necessary to move forward with that. So the district surveys I mentioned in my report was sent out to parents on February 19th, and it's going to theoretically close on Friday. We are looking at the possibility of extending that through the weekend. We are going to be sending out a reminder to parents here this week, and hopefully with some additional clarification points along with that survey so that parents, if they have questions, hopefully that will answer them. I would also encourage parents to either email me or call my office if they have additional questions. We want to make sure that parents are clear about the survey and the purpose of the survey. And so, as I mentioned, really what we're trying to gather is that, parents have made their choice for hybrid or virtual, but if we do make any changes and there's an ability to make a change, we do want to give the opportunity for parents to do that. It also will help us in our planning in terms of the numbers of students that potentially will be in person if we make any changes. And so it's really good to have that data for planning moving forward. And so I also wanted to mention that our current learning breakdown right now is 53% hybrid, 47% online. That number has changed since we did the survey back then. We were more in the middle 60s to high 30s, but as of we stand today, our gold and blue cohorts and Viking cohorts stand at 53 and 47. So that's the district survey. Any questions? I know, Tammy, you said you had some questions, so I'd be happy to answer that. Any?
I'll let other people go ahead.
Steve, this just to clarify, the 5347, that is what we are currently at. This is not the result of the surveys submitted
Correct.
thus far. Okay,
It's where we
thank you.
stand right as of today.
Okay, thank you.
And on that note, Steve, kind of to follow up with that. So if it's 53% hybrid on any given day, that number is actually half of that, correct?
Correct.
Okay,
With
so
our
it's actually,
cohorts.
okay, so the cohorts are actually like more 26-ish% on any given day.
Correct. They're not split exactly, but that's pretty close.
Okay, thank you.
Real quick, a question, not about the survey, but about vaccination. Do we know how many of our staff have already received their second vaccination? And I know there have been some delays just with all the weather and everything across the country. Are we anticipating any delays for those who haven't received their second vaccination yet?
I have not heard anything. We're not anticipating any delays. Obviously, weather, we can't predict the weather moving forward. I do know that did cause some delays for some school districts. I believe East Lansing did end up moving their day back a week because there were a number of teachers that didn't get their second shot in time. And so according to the survey that we put out and what we've been adding people as we go, we're still under that target timeline of March 19th to have everybody fully vaccinated. I do not know, I do not have a number of how many staff are actually going to be there. I believe it's in the middle to 90 percentage, but I don't have the exact numbers.
Hey, Steve.
Mhm.
What's the timeline for us to start seeing what the schedule would be for that next step? I see that's, the survey is potentially closing this Friday, and you said it might extend through the weekend. But I know a lot of people, it's difficult to, again, answer the survey when there's a lot of details kind of like up in the air there.
So as soon as we can put that together, I don't have a date. We have our first meeting with our HA leadership team next week. So hopefully sooner than later, that's our goal. We already have some schedules, tentative schedules kind of drafted that, we want to share and work on, but it's probably going to be a couple weeks before we get the final schedules. We can then share with parents. Because some of the survey data will depend on how we potentially can plan for some of those options that we have, depending upon if the numbers change in terms of hybrid versus virtual. And I'll talk a little about the steps as we move forward through the presentation.
Okay, are some of those details later in the presentation of what
Yes.
kind of be changing? Okay,
Correct.
thank you.
And I guess to clarify, as we did the first time, this is really more gauging interest, checking the pulse, if you will. This is not the commitment, right? Will we be circling back to parents and getting confirmation from them that they do in fact still want to move forward, either with increased in person or stay online?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, when we did the first survey, we really wanted parents to commit for the rest of the year, and that was our plan. And so this survey is just to see if there's anyone willing, or because the data has changed health-wise in our area, would there be any changes potentially for that? Like I mentioned earlier, we're trying to, as much as we can, honor any requests. So, you know, the survey is kind of the deadline in terms of closing, but we'll try to make any adjustments after the fact because we want to give parents as many choices as we can moving forward.
So to clarify my question, I'm sorry, I didn't phrase it very well. So you won't be, I guess, resurveying again, like this,
No.
we're basically asking people to
This is
opt
just-
in to their choice.
We're just asking if their choice would change based on adding more in-time person, so we can use that data to help with the planning moving
Okay.
forward. But
And
currently,
Steve,
their
with that-
choices are in place.
Oh, sorry, this is
Oh, go
Tracy.
ahead.
Well, I was gonna say, I think in planning a little bit, you said adding more half days and I know you've got different plans out there, but just to kind of, are you thinking like moving the half days that the secondary's at to full days, like staying in the same cohort? Or are you thinking, you know, I don't, just so that I guess people would understand, or would it be 4 half days at the secondary? Or are those some of the plans that you're looking at right now based on the number?
Those are some of the plans that we're looking at
Okay.
right now. We have no final answer at this point.
Okay.
Regarding elementary, I know you mentioned it's based on if it is able for someone to switch. Would consideration be taken if someone is switching that they might regain their teacher that they previously switched out of? So it kind of minimizes another teacher change at someone that they'd already be familiar with rather than a third teacher?
We've talked about that. We obviously are going to keep that in mind when we make those changes. But there again, we can't guarantee anything based on the numbers. But yes, that would be one of the considerations that we would keep in mind if we had to make another change.
Okay,
And that's
I think that'd
elementary.
be really helpful for anyone that is thinking about a transition. That, you know, that's an important piece of that puzzle.
And just a reminder to everyone that we are still going to offer a full-time online option. That is not changed, correct?
That's correct.
Thank you. There were some questions. That's why I just wanted to make sure that everybody heard that.
Would the numbers potentially changing of who is in person and who is online negatively affect who has their online teacher right now? So would someone who's currently online be forced to change teachers because of anything changing here?
Not if they're currently online. That's not the plan.
Okay.
So I just wanted to talk just a little about the health data in our area and where we stand. The Centers for Disease Control did just recently change their guidance for K-12 schools. If you may recall, we had 5 risk categories: lowest, low, moderate, high, and highest. And so they've changed those risk categories from 5 to 4. They've combined the lower and the lowest into one category, and their metrics for those particular categories have now changed. So currently the low category, which is the lowest of the categories because lowest and low are now combined, they're saying between 0 and 90 cases per million and positivity rates of less than 5%. They've also changed their time period indicators from 14 days to 7 days in terms of the trends. So right now our current numbers line up with these new low transmission thresholds, in addition to the fact that we've seen 40+ days of declining numbers at every single level. And so if you look at the state, Lansing County region numbers, those fall within very close to those thresholds. And as we've said before, the metrics were just one piece of making decisions moving forward, but I just wanted to make sure we didn't lose sight of the data in terms of where we're at and how we'd make decisions moving forward. So if and when we make changes to our current learning plan, our plan is to keep all of our current safety protocols in place. A mandatory mask wearing, daily cleaning procedures, frequent hand washing and hand sanitizing. The only exception to that is social distancing. And we're not saying we're getting rid of social distancing. We're just saying that that potentially could be challenging if we do increase class size. I did clarify with Linda Vale this morning. There's been different guidance in terms of, is it 6 feet, is it 3 feet? The state came out with revised guidelines and said, the optimum is 6 feet, but they said 3 feet was also possible. It depends on your mitigation strategies and everything else that's going on in your building, the transmission rates in your area. So it's just, there again, it's another one layer of the mitigation strategies. So I want to be clear that we're not getting rid of social distancing, but depending upon where the numbers are, it may be more challenging for the 6 feet or the 3 feet, depending upon how many we have in each class moving forward. So.
Just to, I guess, be clear, so it's the 6 feet that we might not be able to do as we increase our class sizes. Do we think we'll be able to stay close to 3 feet? Are we hopeful that kind of that lower end of that scale is likely?
We're hoping, but there again, not until we get the numbers, we're not sure what that's going to look like. And as Linda pointed out to me today, she said that there are many districts in the state that are full and that are not fully practicing the social distancing. And all of these mitigation factors are all recommended. None of them are mandated at this point. So that's how it's been the whole way. When the state came out with their guidance last summer, mask wearing was the only mandated one. Everything else was just required or recommended, I should say. So.
So to follow up on Molly's point, Steve, so then when parents now are filling out the survey, they should keep in mind that depending upon the number of students that return, there could be 3, 6. I mean, they don't know how well we can maintain the distance because we don't know the numbers at this point, correct?
Correct. And we're going to try to keep class sizes as small as we can, but it's not going to be consistent across the board because not every class and grade level is the same, especially at secondary too. Depending upon the section of a class, it could be, even if we were to combine cohorts, it still could be low numbers. So.
And Greg, the thing that we have to keep in mind, I think it was Tracy who made that comment earlier, we have 53% at in-person right now, but that's divided out among 2 cohorts. So if we start going for a full day, it's already going to double what is already there, or roughly double.
And Steve, apologies, and you may not have seen this, and so I apologize. I thought I was reading an article about the CDC's revised plans. Was there an indication in there that for middle and high schools that have a higher transmission in the area of the county that have higher transmission rates, did they want weekly testing of staffs and students in those areas?
I think testing has been one of the mitigation strategies, but nothing's been mandated. They have said it's just there again, another layer of mitigation, that possible testing would be a way of then reducing the risk level in buildings.
Okay.
And is there capacity in Ingham County to do that? Has Linda talked about making that available more widely? Or is it even happening at all in the county?
So there was a pilot program that came out to do testing. We've been doing it with athletes. We did it with athletes in the fall sports. So, so there is the potential for employees, not for students. It's really only employees at this point, and it's still in the early stages of getting that up and running in terms of getting all the testing kits and everything available for schools if they so choose. But it's only for employees at this point, if we were to move to.
And if we've fully or nearly fully vaccinated everybody, I don't know what testing would do for us. Am I missing something?
I I think it just adds another layer for staff to potentially have the opportunity to be tested if that's in fact what they want to do, just as another layer of protection. But it would only be the rapid testing. It would not be obviously the PCR testing. So, that is what it is in terms of the results and validity of the rapid test versus the PCR tests.
Steve,
Your
it's a
discussions with the
Coordinated. Oh, sorry, Josh.
No, go ahead.
I believe the pilot's being coordinated through MDHHS, and obviously they'd work with the county health department if there was a positive case. But I know we've talked about the capacity at the county health department, and I think this one's being run at the state level with the ISD.
Correct.
How are the in-person current safety protocols going, like the mandatory mask wearing? Are people complying with that easily? I'm just,
Yeah, my understanding is principals have told me that, students are being very cooperative. We've had very little issues, behavior's been very good.
Okay.
Steve, this is Greg. In your discussions with other superintendents in the districts, they employed any additional testing with their staffs?
There's a few districts that have signed up for it. Nobody, I believe, is doing it at this point. I don't think that they've rolled that out yet. I put our name in to at least be on the list so that if that does come up, that we do have that potential ability to do that, but it's been fairly slow in that rollout process at the state level. I don't know of anybody that's doing testing right now other than athletes.
And this is Tammy. I think the going back to the social distancing piece, we repeatedly get questions from parents and community members, quote unquote, why does everybody else get to go back in person and Hazlitt can't? Which is, first, it's an exaggeration. But the reality is there are some schools who did go back and did not pledge or commit to following all of the mitigation strategies as strictly as we committed to. So now that we have the reality of the vaccine for our teachers, and numbers are going back down, et cetera, I think that's why we're in a position where we're considering, easing up on that. Also based on the updated CDC guidance. I think that's important for community members to know.
Steve, could you also talk a little bit more in detail about, once we get the numbers from the survey, why it's not just like, I use the analogy of flipping a switch when we go back, talk about, if you could, for especially for members of the community, because we've gotten this question before, what considerations and the time frame, why we can't just go ahead and flip that switch and send people back right away.
So actually that leads pretty well into my next slide here. So the next step for return to school. So obviously we want to analyze the data, the survey data. So, if that closes this Friday or over the weekend, it's going to take some time to disaggregate the data and look at where the numbers are falling in terms of which direction potentially parents want to move. And I want to be clear, nothing's guaranteed at this point in terms of movement. We just want to offer that option if we can allow for it. So there's some time involved in that. Obviously, we got to put the schedules together, and we need to collaborate with our administrative team and staff to make sure that those schedules are going to work, and there's time involved in doing that and communicating those schedules out to our staff. There may be some additional staffing needs if we go back to a more traditional schedule. If we look at doing lunch or we look at changing up our schedule, there could be some additional supervision needs in our buildings. So we want to make sure, because some of our staff we haven't fully utilized at all times because we're in hybrid, but if we go back in a larger mode, then we potentially have some additional staffing needs, special education, food service, all of those layers across the board. If we do make a change to our schedule, obviously transportation is an issue, so we have to redevelop what those schedules look like. If we make any changes to times or half days, full days, it takes time to put together those schedules. We need to make sure that we can offer transportation at all levels, because we know it's important for our students to have that opportunity to use transportation. As I mentioned, food service. If we decide to go with lunch, we want to make sure that we have all the protocols in place. We haven't served lunch in over a year. So there's, getting all the menus developed, all of those things that we need to do to potentially have that. And then any safety protocols for lunch and curbside distribution, because even though if we were to come back, if we're not fully in, we still have to offer, if we do have an online option, we still have to offer curbside food distribution to our community. So we really have to do both. And so we just want to make sure that we have a staffing to be able to do that. If there are additional safety protocols that we need to take in place with additional in person, we want to make sure that those are properly available. And then communicating, obviously, the revised district plan and timeline to parents once we can come up with that looks like, and we have all these pieces in place. We're happy that we're back in person, but we want to make sure that once we make the next step, they have all the planning tools in place to do that. And a lot of these things we've been doing all along the way, but as the numbers change from the survey and the class sizes potentially could change, we want to just make sure that we have everything in place to do that. So, and as I mentioned earlier, the full vaccination would run through March 19th. So at this point, it would be sometime after that date, once we put our final timeline together. Hope that helped, Greg, in terms of all those
Yes.
additional pieces.
Thank you.
A little bit about some of the possibilities for lunch and those protocols for keeping it safe.
Yeah, so we're looking at the opportunity of getting dividers for our lunch tables if we do serve in the lunchroom, and also adding additional lunch tables if we need to have more social distancing. We want to make sure we can have social distancing at lunch, specifically because that's the one time that students would not be wearing masks. And so obviously masks are a big part of the mitigation strategies. So we're looking at putting up dividers and spacing out in all of the lunchrooms, and potentially spilling over into other spaces that we have, the gym, media center, wherever that might be, that we would offer additional space for lunch, because we do believe at lunchtime that's very necessary that we have social distancing for that point in time. So.
Other questions? Speaking of. So it sounds like, based on some of the questions we've been getting, and I know you've been getting, Mr. Cook, from parents, we don't have some of the answers, right? We don't have all those details. We can't say exactly what it's going to look like, because it's sort of been a moving target, and as it has been all along. So I guess, is there anything you could share or additionally to, I guess, not answer those questions, but to provide information to parents to help them with that decision making?
Not at this point, other than what I've already said. I mean, really, like I said, when we developed the cohorts, we told parents and families that would be their cohort moving forward, unless we had additional space to make those changes. So really, as I mentioned, we're going to stick to that moving forward. We're going to try to offer as many options as we can. If we do come back in person, obviously social distancing will be an issue that we need to address, and how we're going to handle that. But that potentially may make someone who's in person right now want to go back to hybrid. That move is much easier at most levels, to go from in-person to hybrid than going from hybrid to in-person, just because of class size and protocols. So
Do you mean virtual versus
virtual,
hybrid?
so, yeah,
Okay.
so moving from in-person to virtual, sorry, as opposed to coming from virtual to in-person. And there again, as I mentioned, even since we've started hybrid, we've tried to honor as many of those requests as possible at every level. We do have a few waiting lists for a certain grade levels, but we're trying to be as flexible as we can moving forward.
Even drawing your attention back to the other superintendents in the school districts, not that I enjoy going back to these other school districts as examples, but they do provide some, lead information for us here to base some decisions on. But have the superintendents from the other districts talked about their class sizes, where they're at, where they believe their capacity is at, just so that we have an idea of potentially what we're looking at.
So every district is unique. Many of the districts have gone to more of a full day in person for elementary and more of a not a full day for secondary because of lunch. That's really where we're seeing most of the trends, at least in Ingham County. Now, outside of Ingham County, that's a different story. It depends on the district, but some districts have more online than we do, that they have more of a 50-50 or less spread. So it's easier to have lower numbers for the in-person piece, but nobody's really set actual numbers to say, hey, we're only going to take X amount. What they've tried to do is honor as many of the requests as possible and then deal with the mitigation strategies after that to make sure that they have protocols in place to make sure that safety is a priority for those districts. But there are districts that are not, they're back full in that are not social distancing. They're doing their best, but they're doing mask wearing. They're doing a lot of the other protocols, but social distancing is obviously the biggest challenge when we go to more of a full in-person old schedule.
Some of the guidance from at least the state, I can't remember, I looked at the CDC guidance and I need to go back and look at it again. They talk about if you're not able to do the full kind of social distancing, looking at other strategies like cohorting or otherwise grouping students so they're not around too many different students. So then you'd be limiting the risk of transmission to, in a small group. So I guess, are we, like in the elementary, are we looking at it would still just be those students and their teacher in their classroom? Or are we looking at creative arts, which would add another potential exposure? Or how are we looking to maybe mitigate some of that?
So we are looking at the idea if we do go to a more full in person to return to more of a normal schedule in terms of creative arts and such. So it depends on what the creative art is, but we're gonna try to obviously look at those to make sure that we're having less movement as possible. If we can have creative arts teachers teach in the classroom, we would look at that opportunities, but that's still part of the kind of the whole planning phase in terms of how we're going to move forward. But that we're going to try to move, if we can, we're going to try to move back to as close to the old schedule as we can, if in fact that's the direction we go.
Well, this is really important updates. I appreciate the information and all the work to keep us moving forward. Any other questions from board members?
Said you're going to send a reminder to parents. Do you know when you're planning to send that out? And are you going to include any of these kind of frequently asked questions when you send out that reminder?
Correct. That's what we're going to try to do, is put together some answers to the most frequently asked questions that have been asked just the last couple of days. So, but I would encourage folks to either email me or call me, because I'll try to answer as many questions as I can.
I think that'll be helpful. It's good to hear. Thank you. Anyone else? Well, it sounds like we can move on to item number 5 on our agenda, correspondence and comments from the public. Secretary Wheeler, can you report out who we've heard from since our last meeting on the 8th?
Yes. We received an email from Derek and Christina Snyder regarding the survey for in-person learning. Jenna McClendon regarding instructional options survey. Robin Eagleson, I'm sorry, I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Robin Eagleson reached out regarding whether full day in person would be an option and whether teachers could potentially change for students. Vinash Mutatu, representing Hazlitt's Voice for Change, writes regarding communication with the school board. And we received a letter from Kelly Rowe regarding returning to in-person learning and the upcoming changes.
Great, thank you. And most of those letters, the recent correspondence, especially related to the survey, were co-addressed to Mr. Cook. And so in most cases, we deferred to him to provide those responses.
Yes.
All right, so we can move into, thank you very much, Cami. We'll move into comments from the public. So just as a recap for folks, individuals are allotted up to 5 minutes each to speak to the board. It's not intended to be a two-way dialogue. This is opportunity for you to provide feedback, comments, any questions that are asked, in most cases will be deferred back to staff or admin, or other, administrators or other staff as appropriate, to secure the proper answers for you. The way we manage it, we've got a few people, looks like they've called in over the phone. For folks who don't have access to the hand raise feature in the Zoom platform, we do invite you to send an email to webmaster@hazlitt.k12.mi.us, and Mr. Casson will monitor that email address and read out any communication that comes in. Or if you are online with us and in the participant field or at the bottom of your toolbar, there's a raise hand feature. That's how we'll get you queued up for the public comments. You will be recognized. Mr. Casson will unmute you and will ask you to introduce yourself, please stating your full first and last name, because not everybody has their screen names reflecting who they are. And we will acknowledge you, and we'll start your 5 minutes. So I think first I'm showing Amy Webster, but I don't think it's Amy Webster. If you could introduce yourself when Mr. Casson has you unmuted, which he does, and I'm setting my 5-minute timer. Welcome to Hazlitt Board of Education.
Hi, my name is Brian Webster. I have 2 elementary students at Raleigh, a 2nd grader and a 4th grader. I'm just once again expressing my desire to encourage the school board, whatever your personal feelings may be, to know that those might not be the feelings of everybody else that has children that go to the district. So, I really, right now this hybrid program is only giving 10 hours of instruction for my kids a week. I would really, really love to see more than that. It's just not enough. I know that I've communicated with you, Tammy, and you've responded saying that a hybrid is supposed to be a transition, and you too, Mr. Cook. So I want a sense of urgency. I want to see a sense of urgency to give those parents who have missed so much school for their kids more opportunity for learning. Even if you believe, otherwise, respect the fact that there's people that feel differently and they want all the school that they can get for their kids. Of course, I want to be safe. I know you don't like comparing to other districts, but my niece and nephew go right down the road in Brighton. They've been going 4 full days a week all year, wearing masks, social distancing the best they can. The teachers have been keeping their students in the classrooms to eat lunch. They have Wednesdays virtual to kind of make up for the teachers taking on some extra. I can't express enough how much at least my children need to be back at school for more than just this short amount of time. And I just want to express that even if you feel differently, everybody isn't the same. And that's one thing that this has shown us through this pandemic, is that not everybody believes the exact same thing. I want to be safe. I want to keep my kids safe. I just want to see a sense of urgency. It's been a really, really long time. And it seems like we get this survey and then we need 3 or 4 weeks, to make some decisions. I know they're hard decisions, but let's make them quick. 1 full week of school is worth 3 weeks in this hybrid. So I'm just urging you, I understand the difficulties. I'm pleading with you to please give us as much opportunity as we can. So thanks for your time. That's all.
Thank you very much. Next, I'm showing Stacy Camp queued up. Stacy, it looks like you are unmuted. Go ahead.
I just wanted to thank the board and all the teachers for everything you've done. I know this has been an insanely difficult year for all of us, and I appreciate all the time and effort and work that we're all putting into trying to get our kids back to school. Just for a little bit of background, I'm a professor at MSU. I've been running a lab pretty early, I think since June of last year at MSU, and we do critical infrastructure work. I'm an archaeologist, so we've been working on and off in person with permission from the provost, and it's been a very challenging time for us to keep our staff safe, following all the protocol, and these are adult staff. So just listening tonight, I had some questions that came up, and if someone could email me back, that's great. I haven't had time to email everyone. I have about 300 students I'm teaching at MSU this semester, so I've been pretty swamped myself. So the first question I had was just to clarify, we're not following the data from the Michigan Safe Start guidelines anymore, which states our risk is elevated in Ingham County, and I believe it's the highest risk rate in the state right now. I'm not sure why that is, but looking at that, that's what it states. The second question I had is there any possibility of employing the spit test we use at MSU for testing, which I think has had good success at least last fall? And I'm curious about that because I don't know if our children are going to be vaccinated in the fall. And I know a number of us are not vaccinated. Most of us are not vaccinated right now in this county. And my biggest concern right now, sending my kids back, is that they bring it home to me and I can't teach and I can't go to work. So I'm wondering what kind of protection we're offering, testing we're offering for our children, and protection for our community, because once we send kids to school en masse, those kids are going to be out in our community and they may spread it to more vulnerable people that haven't had access to the vaccine yet. Reading the CDC's guidelines for public schools, it states that public schools who do not social distance are at the highest risk for COVID transmission. And I know this has been a very big sticking point at MSU, that we need to stay 6 feet apart. I'm currently teaching a hybrid class, one of the few people who's doing it in my college because it's a lab class. And I have my students there in very tiny groups of 4. And that doesn't work well, but I'm doing it. And we are supposed to keep 6 feet apart. So I'm really uncomfortable with the idea that we're going to throw those rules out the window, especially given what the CDC says. And maybe Linda Vale's advice is correct, but it makes me concerned. The next question I had was what kinds of ventilation and airflow studies have been done this far, if any? I know there's some people at MSU who have been studying that in our classrooms and have really good recommendations based off their findings. I wonder if anyone would be interested in using that knowledge base. And I know some people that would be willing to volunteer their time to do that, to protect our kids. I'm really glad our teachers are protected. That's fantastic. I'm so happy about that. But I think about our kids and our vulnerable kids and the people they go home to who don't have vaccines yet. And then finally, and I checked the Michigan COVID website for schools, and I didn't see that any Ingham County schools other than MSU, which is obvious, have COVID right now. And I was curious, are we reporting that? What's the reporting turnaround time? So if our school reports that, how long does it take to get on the website? If we have cases, how are we notified as parents? And how long does that notification process take? So those are all my questions, concerns. And again, I wish you all the best. Thank you to our teachers who have been absolutely fantastic for my 2 children here in Hazlet. I cannot thank you all enough. So thank you. Good evening.
Thank you very much. Oops. Sorry, playing with my timer. Looks like we've got one more person in the queue. Screen name showing Josh. If you could introduce yourself, you are unmuted. Welcome to the Hazlet Board of Education.
And my name is Josh Heathouse, and I'm a Hazlet parent. I have students at all 3 levels, middle school, high school, and at Ralia. And I emailed the board earlier in the year, and Superintendent Cook, I teach in another local district, and I'm also the association president of another local teachers union. And I just wanted to, first of all, recognize and acknowledge one of the things I think that Hazlitt has done really well is they've taken the time to listen to their staff and prioritize the needs of teachers. And I've been in a district where, as a union, we've kind of had to fight for things like asynchronous days, and it was really, really rough at the start of the year. But that being said, I also want to share at a district that's been primarily in person since the start of the school year. I just want to reassure, and I hope your teachers are seeing this in their buildings now that you're implementing your hybrid plan. But I feel like our kids have been great. And I teach in a very conservative community that is very different from Hazlitt as far as their views about the severity and the risks of the coronavirus. But kids have been great about masks, and we don't have a ton of distancing. I've got about 22 kids in the room every hour, and I'm also teaching kids online. And we have not had any school-related outbreaks or any of those kinds of things. So I just wanted to reassure anyone who has concerns. I feel like we have done it, and we've done it well. And I'm not saying we're the experts and that what's happened in other communities necessarily is going to work here, but I just want to reassure the Hazlitt administration and the teaching staff and the community that it can be done safely. And I know I represented teachers back in September who were very, very anxious, and I think they would all tell you that what we are doing is definitely better for kids. And I know Hazlitt teachers would totally agree with that. But my biggest concern as an educator is we were online for a period of time when in our recent shutdown, so we moved everything online. And the number of students, I teach 8th grade math, who were failing and missing assignments, and just the academic issues we created for those students. I shouldn't say we created, but that they were kind of in as a result of those circumstances. When we came back in person, there's just this huge swing. And I do kind of echo what Mr. Webster said earlier. If I have any frustrations with how Hazlitt has handled this, it does seem like there isn't, everything takes so long, it seems like, to make a decision, or it's really hard to fill out that parent survey when you don't really know what exactly you're responding to or what you're saying or what you're opting into. So I just wanted to express that a little bit. It would be nice from the parent angle. I feel like I have this kind of unique perspective of other, local educator and also a parent who I know from my own students, like academically, they are far underperforming their norm, and they would really benefit from more in-person time. So I just kind of wanted to reassure the community about that. I feel like it can be done safely, and I think that is best for kids. And I hope that we'll continue to see some movement forward in that direction. With vaccinations and everything, I think the light is at the end of the tunnel, and we're all hopefully going to be celebrating that soon. So I appreciate your time and taking the time to listen. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. I'm not showing anybody in the queue at the moment. Mr. Casson, do we have any emails?
No email messages at this time.
Okay, great. Thank you. Oh, we've got one new hand up. So we will ask Mr. Casson to unmute Jason Kilday. And welcome, and go ahead. Floor is yours.
Thank you, President Lammer. Quick question. Kelly Rowe asked for her letter to be read because she could not make it. This is what she wanted to speak about at tonight's meeting. Can Mr. Casson or Mrs. Wheeler read that on her behalf? Otherwise, she asked me to read it, but unfortunately I'm driving right now, so I can't do that.
We definitely don't want you to be reading while you're driving. Was that your only comment? Or
I have one other quick comment, but I just wanted to get that out there. So if somebody could take a look at that, and if it can't be read because of the rules, then it is what it is. But I just want to throw that one out there. My only other comment is I certainly agree with Mr. Webster who talked in earlier. Number one, I'm glad to hear that we are working on additional face-to-face instruction. I've had several conversations with Superintendent Cook. I appreciate all the dynamics that go into making this decision and getting people back to school. But as Mr. Webster and the previous person that just spoke said, it just seems like for whatever reason, this takes a lot longer for us to get our arms around. And I don't know if that goes to the fact of the ever-changing science, the data, the vaccinations, what's going on. But it would really be nice to see a sense of urgency of getting these kids back. I can't imagine what it's like to be a senior in high school right now. and understanding that it's possible they might get 1 month of their senior year, and that's optimistic at this point based on sometime after March 19th. So I would strongly urge the board and Mr. Cook to put a timeline together before the end of tonight's meeting on when we can have this back and this data back to understand what decisions need to be made, when we can make them by, and then how soon after March 19th can we implement a plan? Because again, I know everybody's tired of hearing me talk. Trust me, I am too. But it has the optics of continually kicking the can down the road. And I know that's not the intent after talking to Mr. Cook, but that's the optics and distrust that you have in this district, in this community right now. So set some dates, hold people accountable, and let's work on making this a realistic date, because if we're 2 to 3 weeks out before we can even know what the plan is, much less when it's going to start, you've got to give families time to react. A lot of them have upended their whole schedule to accommodate the hybrid program, the online learning program. This can't be a, here's a week out and here's what we're doing. But unfortunately, if we go much more than a week out, we're going to be into spring break or after that before we get the kids back in school. So please set some dates, hold each other accountable, and execute on them as soon as possible. As always, I appreciate your time and everything you guys are doing to try to make this possible. Thank you so much.
Great, thank you. We'll go to the next person in line, and then Ms. Wheeler, if you have Ms. Rowe's letter, if she is not on the call today, then we probably should read that. But I'm showing iPhone Jeff has joined us. If you could, once you're unmuted, introduce yourself. You should be all set. Oops, hold on. I need to get my timer. All right, go ahead. Welcome.
Hi there, everybody. My name is Jeff Kessner. I sent numerous emails and I've made a few comments to the board before. I just want to piggyback on the comments of Jason Kilday, Brian Webster, and the other gentleman. You know, the cure here cannot be worse than the problem. The CDC, Johns Hopkins, many, many more reputable places, they say that the safest place for kids to be is in school. The data says that kids under the age of 22, 99.9% are safe to go to school. For teachers under the age of 70, and this is the CDC, Johns Hopkins, these are not my numbers. For teachers under the age of 70, 99.5% are safe to be in school. Kids have a very, very low transmission rate. I heard on the news a couple days ago in the state of Florida, and I know that Michigan's not Florida. In the last 8 months, they've had not one fatality or serious case in the whole state of Florida among the kids. My biggest concern right now, and has been all along, is the tremendous damage that's being done to these kids through loss of learning. Again, CDC, Johns Hopkins, numerous agencies have stated 50% learning loss in math for kids, 30% learning loss in reading. It was reported last week that there's been a 30% increase in antidepressants among kids under the age of 22. These kids really need to get back in school. My biggest fear is that we're very, very worried about safety, and we should be. But when you look at the actual data, I just think it's overwhelming. These kids need to be back in school. And then I had one more question. It doesn't have to be addressed tonight, but I may be at a future, maybe at the next board meeting. Is there a plan, or has anybody thought about a plan for these students to catch up? A lot of these students, according to the data that I've been looking at, there's been a lot of it, are never going to be able to catch up fully. But is there a way, maybe more summer school, I think has been discussed, that we can offer these kids a chance to get caught up, because they basically had almost a year of learning loss. And last comment I'll make is one of my biggest concern is, you know, the future of our community is our kids. And if we're not educating our kids, what does that say about Hazlet, Okemos, about all these surrounding communities? So again, I just want to piggyback on a few of these comments made earlier. I just can't stress enough, these kids definitely need to be back in school, and the cure cannot be worse than the problem. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. All right, I'm not showing anybody else in the queue. One last check, Mr. Casson, on the emails.
No, nothing else has come in.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Wheeler, do you have Ms. Rowe's letter for public comments?
I do have it. And when I mentioned her correspondence, it was noted in her letter that she had a designee to read it during public comment. And that's why I did not read it at the time.
Got it. Thank you.
But I do have it. And again, this is received from Kelly Rowe. I had hoped to speak during public comments tonight at tonight's meeting, but I have another meeting to attend and I'm not sure I will be finished in time. My name is Kelly Rowe. My husband graduated from Hazlitt. Our two oldest children graduated from Hazlitt and our youngest is a sophomore. I continue to be a proponent of a safe, full face return to school option for our Hazlitt kids. As a retired K-12 teacher and administrator, I have looked through Hazlitt's process through lenses other than that of only a parent. The district I retired from in Shiawassee County in August had all three plans, virtual, hybrid, and full face-to-face, submitted to the MDE by August 15th of last year and move forward with offering full in-person and virtual options. There are other districts comparable to Hazlitt's size, Fowlerville and Portland, who have managed the same since the beginning of the year. I do not feel our district has done right by our kids considering the resources and staff we have. I am disappointed in the ongoing lack of transparency provided in the process since early last summer. Additionally, I am disheartened by the large number of parents who have decided their voice falls on deaf ears. Parents who say they have not gotten responses to their concerns, emails, or letters. From my vantage point as a parent and experience as an educator, I am frustrated to realize our district operates in a top-down and seemingly minimally collaborative process for programming decisions. Perhaps I am wrong, and I am guilty of forming a conclusion through perception. However, when parents and guardians have minimal concrete communication and details to understand decisions being made, perception becomes reality. The district is quick to share when Hazlitt is recognized as a successful district according to niche magazines, Great Schools, and MDE. These accolades are weighed heavily on test scores. Our district serves a demographic where education and academic success is supported and valued at home. Coupled with the staff and resources our district has, it is no surprise this data point is consistently favorable for Hazlitt. I believe much more goes into earning accolades as a top district. When I read the mission statement you have posted on the website, the mission of the Hazlitt Public Schools is to provide educational opportunities which enable students of all aspirations and abilities to grow and learn. I wonder how often that mission statement led the charge in the planning and decision-making since last June. The educational opportunities for all students in Hazlitt Public Schools this year has not been supported. Full virtual for over half the year, followed by a hybrid model at the secondary level, which essentially provides an optic of face-to-face with implementation of such at a minimal level is not effective for all kids. Providing successful programming for students extends far beyond the academic delivery and assessment of standards. I believe our teachers should be commended for all they have had to do this year, and I also acknowledge many of them have done their absolute best. For students in which virtual learning is not the platform that works best for them, it is no fault of a teacher's effort. The damage some kids have endured through only having an online option cannot be undone, but their recovery can begin sooner than later with a full return to school option as soon as possible. The fact that a most recent survey was distributed to be completed just last week is a very unsettling feeling. I hope this is not a precursor to the length of time additional preparing for a face-to-face return will take. With plans due to the state last August 15th, I would like to believe we should be ready to go in a matter of days once approved. I hope Hazlet will join the ranks of countless schools across the state who have been successful with in-person learning all year. If there's going to be any significant delay, I believe the parents and stakeholders should be provided with detailed reasons and evidence as to why. This is one area the Board of Education and Central Office has fallen short in disclosing all year. I also request the parents and stakeholders be provided with a detailed summary of how Hazlet Public Schools has used the additional funding provided specifically for school programming during COVID-19. I apologize if this is already on the website somewhere and I have missed it. I would like to convey that I can appreciate you may all feel you will never make everyone happy, and that would be true. I know from experience, sometimes the hardest decisions to make are the ones that are best for kids. And as educators, it should always be the driving force of all decisions made. What is best for kids is not always the most popular decision, easiest, painless, or void of additional problem solving, but it is always the right decision. Sincerely, Kelly Rowe.
Thank you for reading that on her behalf. We have a new hand up. Screen name is VRT. You are now unmuted, and if you could go ahead and introduce yourself with your full first and last name. Welcome to Hazlet Board of Education.
Thank you. I wasn't planning on speaking. My name is Vaughn Thompson. I am keeping my video off because my hairdo is pretty messed up right now. But I wanted to, I guess, speak for the almost 50% of parents who have made the difficult decision to remain virtual only. A lot of us have pre-existing conditions and are concerned about our health. And so the decision to have our students remain virtual is a very difficult one. And obviously, a lot of people feel very strongly about going back to school as much as possible, and that's certainly understandable. But for many of us who students are remaining virtual, it's a very tough decision. And it's harder and harder as more time is spent back in the classroom, because those 50% of students who are currently online are also losing in-person teaching opportunities as well. So for everybody that wants to push and push and push and go back into the schools, don't forget there's over half of the population that are still online. And so we have to remember those too. And I want to make sure that people spoke up for that half of the population that is in that situation. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. It's great hearing from you. I think I'm not showing anybody else. So I appreciate everybody who spoke this evening. In a couple instances, there will be some the need to follow up with some answers to specific questions. I need to find my agenda so we can move on to the next item, which is actually board reports. So we'll go to Policy and Personnel Committee report. Ms. Palvarento, please.
So our committee met last Tuesday, February 16th. We discussed both the back to school update, so how everything had been working at that time with students returning to the building. And we also discussed kind of the plans moving forward. So a lot of what Superintendent Cook summarized today and the steps that he's taking. He talked about the survey. He also discussed conversations with administrators and with our teachers and other staff, and making kind of determinations of what other measures we might need to take as we bring students back a little bit more often. So some of the things we talked about with lunchtime and separating people out, as well as the social distancing conversation. We also had an enrollment update from Mr. Jensen with our February student count numbers that were preliminary. We also talked about the formula for state funding this year that's been tweaked given everything going on with COVID. And then we discussed just the anticipated timeline for possible policy recommendations from Neola this spring, as well as working with Mr. Dietzel at Thrun around some discrepancies he identified in our board policies and just trying to fix those to make sure they are clear. And that was our meeting.
Great, thank you. Any questions about policy and personnel? All right, Mr. Bird, Finance and Facilities.
Yes, thank you, President Lemmer. Very similar agenda once again.
Go first the next time.
So, but yes, very same agenda. You know, quickly, the superintendent did go through the return to in-person, how it's been going since students and teachers were back in the classroom. Shared, some information from the building principals on that, and then again talked about the return to school update, the survey, the time frame, and also heard from Finance Director Rick Jensen about the student count numbers and how that potentially could impact us. So again, don't want to draw on because very similar agenda. So thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from board members? All right. Next up, Hazlitt Voices for Change. Mr. Cook, any updates on your end?
Not at this point. We did receive an email from one of the members before the meeting, but I have been in contact with Dr. Fanau in terms of the next steps for our equity plan. That plan for survey is still scheduled to go out by the week of March 1st. So we're putting together those details in terms of what that looks like and how we move forward with getting that out to our community, staff, and our students. So that's pretty much it.
Great. And I understand at the secondary level, building staff got a professional development opportunity. Was it last week or the week before?
It was last Friday.
Great. Just heard from a couple of people and it sounded like it was very well received and well done. So it's glad to hear that. And yes, speaking to the letter we received, I glanced at it literally minutes before the meeting, so I haven't had a chance to respond back, but there was interest in having a meeting between the Voices for Change members and the board. And so depending on, again, we've got Open Meetings Act and quorum related issues if we were going to have a full board conversation. So we'll probably look at having a few representatives who are willing and able to meet maybe with a handful or however many members of HVOC that are interested in speaking with us. We very much want to continue that collaboration. I think there may be a perception that those efforts have been kind of lost in the whole COVID conversation. And I certainly don't want that to be either the perception or the reality of our board's commitment to making really important changes structurally and environmentally within our buildings and within our systems. So we'll certainly follow up on that request. I don't know if any board members in particular, we'll follow up with you individually, but if anyone is particularly moved and wants to be part of that, I was going to say face-to-face meeting, but it won't be face-to-face. It'll have to be virtual. But if anyone wants to be part of that meeting, please let me know. But we will reach out and try to coordinate something. There have been individual communications between me and individual members and other adult advisors to the group, but I'll take responsibility in having been remiss and not necessarily convening a formal meeting to make sure that everybody's feeling involved and engaged in this work. So we will circle back and make sure that we are more actively involved with those communications. So any questions or comments about that? Reactions to the letter? All right. Great, thank you. So we are at items from board members.
I got
Greg,
something,
you had
Tammy. Yes, I was reminded that to mention the fact that it's season of giving here. The National Honor Society has several efforts underway here. They have a bottle drive for Mr. Wajenki's charity there. You got this. They're also collecting items for Haven House, and then obviously a blanket donation for the Homeless Angels. And so Ms. Parr and the National Honor Society are making those efforts happen here, and just wanted to raise the community's awareness to that. And if they can help out, please do so.
Excellent, thank you.
I just wanted to follow up on, it's been said a couple of times already by members of the board and members during public comment, but really appreciate all of our teachers and staff, as we've moved to a hybrid process, both those who are hybrid and those who remain online. We know you're doing exceptional work and we really appreciate what you're doing. So thank you.
Thank you, Greg. I'll second that.
So I actually have something I wanted to mention. I think maybe this was on my radar before the last meeting and I forgot to address it, but it's kind of a fun fact, but we have one of our Hazlet bowling team members a couple weeks ago apparently got just shy of a perfect game. Lincoln Brickezian, I hope I'm getting close to pronouncing that, scored a 298 in a recent bowling match. So kudos to Lincoln. Very, very impressive.
I assume he won.
I would hope so, yes.
Well, and thank you to all of our coaches now that the sports have started back up and we're going to have spring sports starting soon, and to our athletic director, to Darren. Just the work to do all of this safely, definitely at the high school level, but even at some of our elementary and middle school levels where we have volunteers who are doing this and doing it the right way. I think we just all appreciate what's being done both by our students and our coaches.
All right, anyone else? Looking at you, Tracy? No.
Nope, not tonight. Usually I'm pretty chatty, but
Very good. All right, we'll move on to, or actually, I guess I missed Josh too. I don't want to skip over. Everybody good? All right. We'll move on to the consent agenda then. We have 4 items. I will read through those. If anyone needs any items pulled, please let me know. First is the approval of the minutes from the February 8th regular Board of Education meeting. Next are approval of the minutes of the February 16th Policy and Personnel Committee meeting. Number 3, approval of the minutes of the February 18th Finance and Facilities Committee meeting. And finally, item number 4, the 2021 proposed budget amendment, which was attachment A in our packets, following the presentation from our last meeting by Mr. Jensen about tweaks to the 2021 budget. Now that we have real numbers to work with and not the imaginary hypothetical ones that we worked with in June when we had to pass our budget. Anyone need anything pulled on our consent agenda? All right, hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I move that we approve the consent agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Maury. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Go with Greg.
Go ahead with Tracy.
All right, so we have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. I'll do a roll call to just confirm those. I'll just go in alphabetical order. Byrd?
Yes.
Collins?
Yes.
Mashad?
Yes.
Maury?
Yes.
Paul Varento?
Yes.
Wheeler?
Yes.
And I'll vote yes. That's 7-0 in support of the consent agenda. So we'll move on to announcements. We have a Policy and Personnel Committee meeting scheduled for March 2nd at 9 a.m. This will be held remotely. The county is still under a moratorium on in-person gatherings. We have a Finance and Facilities Committee meeting scheduled for March 3rd. That will also be held at 9 a.m. and also be held remotely. The next regularly scheduled Board of Education meeting will be held on March 8th at 7 p.m. That will also be a virtual meeting. And then our second meeting of March, regularly scheduled Board of Education meeting will be held on March 22nd, also at 7 p.m. For both of those, Zoom link will be provided for public participation. Those are the announcements for this evening. Do we have a motion for adjournment?
We adjourn.
Motion by Palvarento, second by Mashad. All in favor? Say
Aye.
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 Any opposed? I am in favor of that as well. The meeting is adjourned. Have a nice evening, everybody. Thank you.